statues. They're how society honors people from history and where teenagers meet at the park to buy drugs. Since the Black Lives Matter protests began in the wake of George Floyd's murder, protesters have been tearing down Confederate memorials around the country. And now, so many of those statues have been pulled down that people are turning their sights on other historical figures.
In Portland, protesters lighting on fire the monument of George Washington before pulling it down. The nation's first president face down and covered in graffiti because activists say he was a slave owner. Demonstrators targeting Ulysses S. Grant, who led the Union Army against the Confederacy but was said to have owned a slave. And Francis Scott Key, who wrote the lyrics to the Star-Spangled Banner but was also a slave owner.
The American Museum of Natural History in New York City announced that it will remove a statue of President Theodore Roosevelt from its front steps. The statue features him on a horse with a Native American man and an African American man standing on either side of him.
Woo-wee! This is not a good time to be a statue. Because at first, it felt like only the Confederate statues were coming down. But now it seems like they're just tearing down anything that doesn't move. I'm so afraid that now when I'm waiting to cross the street, I keep moving just so that no one comes in and tries to rip off my head. I will be honest though. The museum saying they're going to take down the Teddy Roosevelt statue, it actually makes sense to me. Because as someone who lives in New York, I've walked past that statue so many times. And every time I've looked at it, I've thought, wow, that's an amazing statue that is also very problematic. Although I bet in the 1930s, that was considered a super woke statue. The sculpture was probably like, look at that. I put an Indian and a Negro being led by our white savior. I'm the most liberal guy in New York City. Now look, that statue was originally supposed to symbolize Roosevelt's friendship with other races. But, I mean, the imagery's not good. Like, if you're such good friends, why don't you let them up on your horse? Or at the very least, give them something to ride. Now, one reason that these protests are still going strong is because racism is also going strong. I mean, just look at what happened after NASCAR banned the Confederate flag.
A disturbing discovery, a noose found in the garage stall of Bubba Wallace at the Talladega Superspeedway in Lincoln, Alabama on Sunday. Less than 2 weeks after Wallace, who's NASCAR's only full-time black driver, successfully convinced the Stock Car Racing Series to ban the Confederate flag at its tracks and facilities. Wallace responding overnight, writing, "Today's despicable act of racism and hatred leaves me incredibly saddened and serves as a painful reminder of how much further we have to go as a society and how persistent we must be in the fight against racism." NASCAR releasing a statement reading in part, "We've launched an immediate investigation and will do everything we can to identify the person responsible and eliminate them from the sport."
Man, this is such bullshit. Bubba Wallace spoke out against racism, and clearly someone wanted to send a reminder of what can happen to black people who don't know their place. And you know, because NASCAR has so many Confederate flag fans, this is something that might not stop for Bubba. Like, I can tell you, fans are going to be saying horrible things. People are going to be putting up signs. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Bubba starts getting pulled over during the race. Sir, we've been getting some calls that you've been circling this neighborhood for a couple of hours. Can I see your license and registration? I will say this though. As much as this story is infuriating, it also is wonderful how these racists expose themselves. Because all these Confederate flag-loving people always say the same thing. This has nothing to do with race. The flag is about heritage. It has nothing to do with racism. But as soon as a black man stands up against the Confederate flag, the first thing they do is respond with racism. Like they say, the flag is just about Southern heritage. But nobody showed up to that garage with a Georgia peach cobbler. No one didn't show up there like, I'm going to teach you a lesson about disrespecting Southern heritage. You want one slice or two? But let's move on to John Bolton, former Trump National Security Advisor and photo negative of Steve Harvey. His new tell-all memoir is officially out, and yesterday he sat down with ABC News to talk about it.
Overnight, John Bolton with a stinging rebuke of his former boss, President Trump.
I don't think he's fit for office. I don't think he has the competence to carry out the job. It's not clear to me that he read much of anything. A lot of people have complained that he has a short attention span. Decisions are made in a very scattershot fashion.
How do you think history will remember Donald Trump?
I hope it will remember him as a one-term president who didn't plunge the country irretrievably into a downward spiral we can't recall from. We can get over one term. 2 terms I'm more troubled about. I'm not going to vote for him in November. Certainly not going to vote for Joe Biden either. I'm going to figure out a conservative Republican to write in.
Okay, hold up. Donald Trump is a danger to the survival of the country, but you're going to vote third party? We must do everything we can to defeat Donald Trump, except the one thing we can do to defeat Donald Trump. Get the f*** out of here, man. Sometimes in life, you only have 2 choices, okay? Pepsi or Coke, boxers or briefs, Mario or Luigi. I know it's not fair, but you can only pick one to have sex with. Personally, I'm going with Mario. Yeah, he's shorter, but in my mind, that means he's got something to prove. So, Bolton spent the entire interview talking about how unprepared, incompetent, and corrupt the president is. But the weird thing is, Bolton joined the Trump administration over a year into Trump's term. So, I mean, he probably should have already known all of this, right? Why does it feel like everyone goes confidently into the Trump White House like, I'll be the one to tame Donald Trump, and then they walk out 6 months later like, he made fun of me, and he said all my ideas were dumb, and you can read all about it in my book that's coming out next week. Also, Bolton could have said all of this stuff during the impeachment hearings, but no. He wanted to put it into his tell-all book so that he could make some money. There's very little that I respect about John Bolton. In fact, the only thing I thought was cool about this interview was that he wore a mask during it. What's that? It's not a mask. That's what it... Oh, that's his... Oh. All right, never mind. There's nothing I respect about him.